The first thing I remember is the metallic taste of fear in my mouth. The piercing cold of the night clung to my skin like a vow. The ground was mud, and my hands trembled, not just from the wind, but from the exhaustion of existing in a body nobody wanted. They called me an Omega, a word spat with disdain in the alleys of the settlement, as if it were synonymous with failure, as if my voice was nothing more than an ownerless echo. I grew accustomed to the silence, to the loneliness that grows between the bones when the world decides you don't deserve any place. Before we dive into this story, leave your comment with a rating from 1 to 10 and tell us which city you're joining us from. May this moment bring reflection and emotion to your heart. That night, however, loneliness materialized before me. 4 shadows surrounded me, human figures, eyes alight with cruelty and hunger. Their laughter echoed through the woods like the sound of clashing iron. "What's a thing like you doing out here alone?" one of them asked, and the way the word "thing" left his mouth wounded me more than the fist that followed. I fell onto the damp ground, the taste of earth mixed with the blood that trickled from my lip. I remember thinking that perhaps this was the end always meant for me. Invisible, forgotten, left to scorn, but the wind shifted. A low, deep sound travelled through the forest, a growl that seemed to come from the very belly of the earth. Then, the snap of branches, the sound of paws against the ground, the unison chorus of 20 wolves breaking through the fog. The air grew dense, electric, and for an instant we all froze, as if the world had forgotten to breathe. The men recoiled, and I lifted my eyes, unable to comprehend what I saw. A living wall of muscle and fangs, silver eyes reflecting the moon, and in their center, him, the Alpha King. The first time I saw him, I understood the meaning of silence. His presence wasn't explained. It imposed itself. The dark cloak fell over his broad shoulders, and there was something in his gaze that burned, a mix of power and restraint, of fury and dominance. The voice that followed was deep, made of stone and wind. "Step away from her," he ordered, and none of the 4 dared to reply. One step from him was enough, and the wolves aligned, as if the air obeyed his will. No one had ever spoken for me. No one had ever defended me. And suddenly, there he was, the man who governed everything that kept me on the fringes. The bandits fled in desperation, and I remained fallen, huddled on the ground. I didn't know whether to thank him or fear him. He approached slowly, and the sound of his boots on the wet ground was the rhythm of my heart. When he stopped before me, he lifted my chin with a gesture that seemed more like a sentence than comfort. "You're bleeding," he murmured, "but you still look into the eyes of those who threaten you. There's too much strength in what they taught you to hide." I wanted to answer, but the words died. I felt the warmth of his hand and the cold of the distance between us. He helped me up, and in that touch there was something deeper than pity, a contained curiosity, a silent recognition. "Why would the king care about a rejected Omega?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. He didn't answer. He just gazed at me, and in that look there was something that tore at me, the reflection of a soul also captive. The next morning I was brought to his territory. The castle, built upon rocks and mist, seemed to breathe. The corridors smelled of ancient wood and cold iron. The servants watched me with eyes that hid questions, and the ladies whispered my name as if pronouncing a scandal. I felt the weight of judgment piling upon me, but still, I walked with my head held high. I had learned that dignity is the last garment left to us when all else is stripped away. In the halls, he always appeared in silence. The murmur ceased upon his entry, and gazes bowed, fearing what they didn't understand. I never saw him smile, but there was tenderness in the severity of his gaze when it met mine. Sometimes he seemed to want to say something, but backed away, like one who fears their own weakness. And then, at the great full moon banquet, the inevitable happened. Voices rose in laughter and clinking glasses when one of the ladies, daughter of one of the councillors, stood and pointed me out before everyone. "It's her," she said, "the bastard the king protects." An Omega he hid among the wolves. The hall fell silent. The candles flickered. I felt all eyes burning on me, and the thin air weighed in my lungs. I wanted to disappear. But before shame could consume me, he rose. No sound, no disguise. The king crossed the hall, his cloak trailing the power of thunder, and stopped before me. He took my hand, the same one that was trembling, and declared, No one touches what is mine to protect." The words fell upon the hall like a storm, half bowed, half trembled. I just looked at him, trying to understand if that gesture was pity or something more dangerous. He held my gaze, and then whispered low enough for only me to hear. "Don't fear what awakens in me, little one. There are forces even a king cannot control." And in that instant, I understood that my destiny wasn't to flee. It was to face the very weight of what was beginning to grow between us. A bond made of fear, loyalty, and something neither of us dared to name. The wolves' roar sounded again from outside, and I knew nothing would be the same. In the following days, my life was divided between gazes and whispers. The servants brought me perfumed baths and dresses of fabrics I had never touched. So soft they seemed made of clouds. My rough hands, accustomed to the harshness of life in the settlement, hesitated to touch such delicacy. When I looked at myself in the gilded mirrors, I saw a stranger. Who was that woman with shiny hair and clean skin? Beneath the layers of silk and embroidery, I still felt like the same despised orphan, the same Omega everyone avoided. One of the maids, Lena, was different from the others. As she arranged my hair one morning, she spoke without lifting her eyes. "They say the king has never brought any woman within his walls, not even the suitors the councillors presented him." "I'm not here by his choice," I replied, feeling the weight of that reality. "I'm here because he found me bleeding in the forest." Lena smiled, a sad, knowing smile. "That's not what the castle walls whisper, my lady. The king rides alone every night, and it was precisely on the night you were attacked that he dismissed the guard and left with only his wolves." The comb paused mid-motion, and our gazes met in the mirror. There was something in her words that made me tremble. "What are you implying?" "That perhaps the king knew exactly where you would be. That perhaps he had been watching you for much longer than you imagine." Before I could answer, we heard footsteps in the corridor. It was Virginia, the daughter of the first councillor, the same one who had exposed me at the banquet. She entered without knocking, as if my chambers were an extension of her backyard. Her eyes assessed me with calculated disdain from head to toe. "So this is our sovereign's new distraction," she said, walking around me like one examining an animal for sale. "An Omega from the settlement. I wonder how long it will take before the charm wears off." I held her gaze firmly, though I felt my stomach clench. "What do you want, madam?" She laughed, a beautiful sharp laugh like broken glass. "Just to warn you, little wild one. The king is like winter. He may seem beautiful and calm, but he kills those who get too close. We've seen many like you. Passing curiosities he discards when he tires of them." "I am not a curiosity," I replied, my voice firmer than I felt. "I am someone he chose to protect." Virginia approached so closely that I could smell her jasmine perfume, too sweet, cloying. "Protect? Is that what you think?" Her laugh this time was crueler. "He keeps you here like he'd keep a bird in a gilded cage. For amusement, for boredom. When he's done playing, he'll throw you back into the mud you came from." Something inside me, something I didn't know existed, burned like a live coal. "Or perhaps," I replied softly, "he keeps me here because I'm the only one who doesn't grovel at his feet, begging for scraps of attention." The slap came swift, cracking against my face before I could react. The impact made my head snap and Lena gasped, dropping the comb. Virginia trembled, not from fear, but from ill-contained fury. "You'll learn your place, Omega, even if it's the most painful way." When she left behind a heavy silence and the cloying scent that seemed to have contaminated the air. Lena touched my shoulder, hesitant. "Be careful, my lady. Her family controls half the council. Virginia was betrothed to the king since childhood." I ran my fingers over where my skin burned. "Does the king know about this? About her threats?" "The king knows everything that happens within his walls," Lena replied, resuming combing my hair with trembling fingers. "But that doesn't mean he'll intervene. Some say he amuses himself with court games." That night, I couldn't sleep. I looked out the window of the tower where they housed me, watching the moon illuminate the forest that stretched to the horizon. Below in the courtyard, enormous wolves paced in circles like restless sentinels. Suddenly, I noticed a solitary figure walking among them. Even from a distance, I recognized his bearing, his way of walking. The king. He seemed to talk with the wolves and they responded, moving around him like living shadows. An unexplained impulse made me leave the room. I descended the stone staircases, my bare feet touching the coldness of the floor. The corridors were deserted, lit only by torches that cast dancing shadows on the walls. Something pulled me outside to him, a force I didn't understand and couldn't resist. When I stepped into the courtyard, the night air enveloped me like an icy caress. The wolves noticed my presence immediately, turning their heads in unison, eyes gleaming in the darkness. But they didn't advance. They just watched, quiet, alert. The king stood with his back to me, looking at the moon. He didn't turn but spoke as if he already knew I was there. There are nights when the weight of the crown is greater than the strength of the shoulders that bear it. I remained motionless, uncertain whether I should approach or retreat. "Why did you bring me here?" I finally asked, my voice small against the immensity of the night. Now he turned. Without the ceremonial cloak, without the formality of the court, he seemed at once more human and more dangerous. His eyes reflected the moonlight, two deep lakes where I could drown. "Why did you go out into the forest that night?" The question caught me off guard. I was running away. From what? From everyone. From the settlement. From the stairs. From being who I was there. I hesitated. From being nothing. He approached slowly and the wolves parted, silent. "You are not nothing, little Omega. You never were." When he stood before me, it was as if the world had shrunk to fit only the space between us. "I brought you here because I saw something in your eyes that I recognized. Something I also carry." "What?" "The loneliness of one who is surrounded, yet never understood." His words touched something deep inside me, a sensitive spot I didn't know existed. I swallowed hard, fighting back the sting in my eyes. "Virginia said I'm just a distraction. A curiosity you'll soon discard." His expression hardened, a shadow passing over his face like a cloud before the moon. "Virginia speaks from what she fears, not what she knows. She's known you for years. Aye, for days." "And yet," he said, his hand rising to touch my face exactly where Virginia had slapped me, "you see me as no one ever has." His touch was warm against my cold skin, and I closed my eyes for an instant, surrendering to that sensation. When I opened them again, he was closer, his eyes fixed on mine with an intensity that made me tremble. "There are rumors," I whispered. "About you. About what happens on full moon nights." A rare, almost imperceptible smile touched his lips. "And what do those rumors say?" "That you transform, that you command the wolves because you are one of them." The silence that followed was heavy, dense. Around us, the wolves approached, forming a circle, eyes attentive. The king took my hand and placed it against his chest. Beneath the fabric, I felt his heart beating. Strong, fast, alive. "What do you think?" he asked. "Look at me, Omega. Look into my eyes and tell me what you see." I obeyed, and what I saw left me breathless. Something ancient, wild, untamed. A power contained only by his own will. "I see someone who carries more than a crown," I replied, my voice trembling. "Someone with secrets as deep as the forest." He smiled then, more openly, revealing white teeth, too sharp for an ordinary man. "And yet you don't run." "No. Why?" I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the truth before even speaking it. "Because I also have secrets. Because I also am not what I seem." His eyes narrowed, a spark of interest igniting in them. "Tell me." I shook my head. "Not yet. Not until I fully trust you." "And do you trust me now?" "I trust you enough to be here. To not run. To look you in the eyes and say I'm not afraid." He laughed softly, a surprisingly warm sound. "Brave girl. Or perhaps just foolish." Before I could answer, one of the wolves, larger than the others with silver fur, raised its head and howled. The sound cut through the night like a blade, and the others responded in chorus. The king looked at the sky, where the moon began to be covered by clouds. "Return to your chambers," he ordered, suddenly distant, his voice resuming the tone of command. "There are things tonight you must stay away from." I wanted to protest, but something in his gaze stopped me. I recoiled a step. "Tomorrow," I ventured. "Can we continue this conversation tomorrow?" For an instant, I saw hesitation. almost vulnerability on his face. Then he nodded briefly. "Tomorrow, at dawn, in the northern gardens. Come alone." I returned to the tower, my heart beating like a war drum. Through the window, I watched as he disappeared into the forest, followed by the wolves. The moon broke through the clouds again, bathing everything in silver light. And then, in the distance, I heard a different howl. More powerful, deeper than the others. A howl that seemed to come not from the forest, but from within it, from its most secret depths. I knew, without needing confirmation, that it was him. Dawn arrived shrouded in mist, as if the night was reluctant to yield to day. I dressed simply, choosing from the many dresses the most discreet of thick, earthy-toned fabric. No jewels, nothing that reminded me of the artificiality of the court. I wanted to meet him as I truly was, and without disguises, without masks. The northern gardens were at the most secluded point of the castle, bordering the dense forest that stretched like a green sea to the horizon. When I arrived, there was no one, only silence, broken by the occasional song of a bird and the distant murmur of a stream. I sat on a stone bench watching the dew that still sparkled on the leaves, transforming the garden into a carpet of tiny diamonds. He arrived without warning, silent as mist. When I turned, he was already there, standing a few steps away. He seemed exhausted, with deep circles under his eyes and a tear in his shirt sleeve that revealed a freshly healed cut on his arm. "You're injured," I observed, instinctively rising. "It's nothing," he replied, his voice hoarse as if he hadn't used it in a long time. "It heals quickly." There was something different about him this morning, a roughness, an ill-contained wildness that hadn't been present the night before. His eyes, usually calm and calculating, now burned with an inner fire. His hands, strong and steady, trembled slightly. "What happened last night?" I asked, approaching slowly. He studied me for a long moment before answering. "Do you really want to know? Or do you prefer the illusion of ignorance?" I never chose ignorance even when knowledge hurt. A deep sigh escaped him. He ran a hand through his hair, a surprisingly human gesture for someone so controlled. "Sit with me," he requested, indicating the bench. When I did, he maintained a distance that seemed deliberate. "What do you know about the history of the kingdom?" The question caught me off guard. What everyone knows, I suppose. That it was founded 7 generations ago, when the first Alpha King expelled invaders from the southern lands. That since then, the same lineage has governed, protecting the people and maintaining peace. And about the curse? What do they say about it in the settlement? I hesitated. The curse was a whisper, something mothers told their children so they wouldn't venture into the forest on full moon nights. They say the first king made a pact with ancient spirits to gain the strength needed to win the war. That in return, his soul and that of his descendants would be divided between man and beast. He smiled, but it was a humorless smile. Stories, half-truths wrapped in fantasy to make them palatable. He lifted his face to the sky, as if searching for words in the air. The truth is simpler and more terrible. It wasn't a pact, it was a punishment. The first king killed a sacred wolf, guardian of the ancient forest. With its blood, he marked himself and his warriors, believing he would thus gain the beast's strength. And he did, but he didn't foresee the price. That he would become a wolf. Not exactly. His eyes met mine, intense, burning with an inner light. He became something between man and wolf, neither one nor the other. A divided being, condemned to live eternally between 2 worlds, belonging completely to neither. The same curse passed to his children, and to their children's children. I swallowed hard, my throat suddenly dry. "So 3 nights each moon, on the waxing, full and waning moons. The wolf takes control and the man sleeps. Not completely. There are still fragments of consciousness, but they are just islands of reason in an ocean of instinct." I tried to absorb his words, the magnitude of what he was revealing to me. The wolves that follow you are like me, descendants of the original warriors. My personal guard, my pack, we carry the same blood, the same curse. Such a grand revelation should have terrified me. It should have made me recoil, flee, scream. But instead I felt a strange calm, as if finally an important piece had fallen into place in a puzzle I had been trying to solve forever. "That explains why you saved me that night," I said softly. "It was the waxing moon. You were transformed, he nodded slowly. The wolf smelled your scent first, the fear, the blood, but there was something more. He hesitated, searching for the right word. Something familiar, like an echo of something it already knew. What do you mean? The king rose abruptly, walking a few steps to a wild rosebush growing in a corner of the garden. He broke off a thorny branch and returned, extending it to me. Take it. I obeyed, confused. The moment my fingers touched the branch, I felt the thorns pierce my skin. Small drops of blood welled up, red against the white of my fingers. The king watched intently, his eyes fixed on the trickling blood. What does this prove? I asked. That you bleed like any human, he replied, his voice low. But you're not just any human, are you? Shock coursed through me like an electric current. What do you mean? Your scent, your presence, the way the wolves react to you. Not with aggression, nor with submission, but with curiosity, with recognition. His eyes penetrated mine, searching for something beyond words. Who is your mother? The question hit me like a physical blow. I don't know. I was abandoned as a baby, raised by an old healer in the settlement who died when I was 12. After that, I lived on favors and odd jobs. And you never noticed anything different about yourself? No. Peculiarities? I hesitated. There were things, small things I always tried to ignore, explain, hide. Things that made me even stranger in the eyes of others. I heal quickly. Wounds that should take weeks heal in days. I can smell scents others don't perceive. And sometimes, I swallowed hard, sometimes I hear voices in the forest, like distant whispers calling. He nodded, as if each word confirmed a long-held suspicion. The sacred blood hasn't completely diluted, even after generations. In some, it manifests more strongly. In others, only as distant echoes of a forgotten power. Are you saying I'm saying there's more to you than you imagine, that perhaps you carry in your veins the same blood that runs in mine. Not the complete curse, but fragments of it, and that explains a lot. What does it explain? Why I was drawn to you from the first moment. Why the wolf recognized you, not as prey, not as a threat, but as an equal. The world seemed to spin around me. Everything I believed about myself, all the explanations, all the stories I told myself to justify the strangeness, the fears, the loneliness, crumbled like a sandcastle before the tide. If that's true, what does it mean? He approached then, closing the distance he had kept until now. His fingers touched my face so gently I barely felt them. It means, little Omega, that you were never nothing, that you carry within you a power you can't even imagine. And it means... He hesitated, and I saw something in his eyes I had never seen before, vulnerability. It means that perhaps you are the only one capable of understanding what it is to live divided between two worlds. His proximity left me breathless. There was something magnetic in his presence, something that pulled not only my body but my soul towards him. It was like being on the edge of a cliff, terrifying and yet irresistibly attractive. I'm afraid, I confessed, my voice barely a whisper. Of what? Of discovering what I truly am, of not being who I thought I was, of losing myself in the process. His hand slid from my face to my neck, resting on my accelerated pulse. There is no loss in discovering yourself, only liberation. And His voice deepened, becoming almost a growl. I will be by your side every step of the way. At that moment, a bell rang in the distance, announcing the time for the first meal. The spell broke, and he quickly moved away, as if suddenly remembering who he was, where we were. The court will be gathered, he said, the king's mask falling back over his features. I must go. I nodded, still stunned by everything I had discovered. And what about me? What should I do with all of this? He looked at me for a long time, as if weighing his words. For now, keep your secrets guarded. There are eyes and ears in every stone of this castle, and not all are loyal to me. Tonight I will send Lena with instructions. Trust only her and me. When he turned to leave, I couldn't hold back the question that burned in my throat. Why are you telling me all this? Why do you trust me? He stopped without turning. Because in 7 generations of reign, you are the first who looked at me and saw beyond the crown, beyond the curse. He finally turned his face, and there was an expression on it that made me tremble. The first who saw neither the king nor the wolf, but the man trapped between the two. With those words, he disappeared among the trees, leaving me alone with the weight of revelations that transformed not only my understanding of the world, but of myself. The days that followed were a whirlwind of discoveries and dangers. As the king had promised, Lena came to me that same night, bringing not only instructions, but also a small worn cover book, without a title. "Your Majesty asked me to give you this," she said, looking nervously at the door as if fearing to be overheard. "He said you should read it when you're alone and then hide it where no one can find it." The book weighed in my hands as if made of lead, not paper. The yellowed pages contained ancient handwriting, almost illegible in some passages. It was a diary, the diary of the first queen, written more than 200 years ago. In it, she described not only the curse, but something more, a prophecy. When the divided blood finds its equal, the cycle can be broken. The wound opened by the first shedding can be closed by the last sacrifice. I read and reread those words until they etched themselves into my memory. There was something in them that deeply frightened me. A finality, a destiny that seemed too heavy to bear. Could it be that the king believed I was this equal blood? That somehow I could help him break the curse that had haunted his lineage for generations? The answer came in the form of a formal invitation to the new moon ceremony, a private ritual performed only in the presence of the council and special guests. The invitation, delivered by a royal messenger, caused a commotion among the court ladies. Virginia, in particular, seemed furious. "This is absurd," I heard her say to one of her friends as they passed me in the corridor. "An Omega from the settlement participating in a sacred ritual. My father won't allow it." But her father, the first counselor, Counselor Arthur, didn't seem to share his daughter's indignation. When we met in the Great Hall, he examined me with calculating, almost clinical eyes. He was a tall, thin man, with perfectly aligned grey hair and eyes that seemed to see through skin. "So you are the king's protected one," he said, his voice soft as silk. "I confess I see nothing extraordinary, but our sovereign has always had peculiar tastes." I maintained an erect posture, refusing to show the discomfort his words caused me. "The king is generous in his protection," I replied, keeping my tone neutral. The counsellor smiled, but the smile didn't reach his eyes. Generosity. That's one way to see it. Another would be interest. He leaned slightly, lowering his voice. "Do you know why you were invited to the ceremony, girl? Do you know what happens on the new moon?" I shook my head, although the Queen's diary had mentioned the ritual briefly. "That's when the king chooses his companion," he said, intently observing my reaction. "When he presents to the court the one he considers worthy of sharing not only his bed, but his blood, his power." A chill ran down my spine. "I don't believe that's the reason for the invitation. I'm just an Omega from the settlement," he completed, his smile widening. "Yes, we all know. What intrigues me is why he would choose someone so unsuitable." His eyes examined me again, as if searching for some hidden secret, unless there's something in you that the rest of us cannot see. Before I could answer, another voice interrupted. "Counselor Arthur, the meeting is about to begin." It was the king himself, appearing like a silent shadow. His eyes met mine for a brief instant, conveying a silent warning. "Beware." The counsellor made an elaborate bow. "Your Majesty, I was just getting to know your guest better." "I'm sure she's had enough of your hospitality for today," the king replied, his voice calm but with a veiled threat. "Come, the counsellor waits." When they moved away, I felt the weight of hostile gazes around me. It wasn't just Virginia, it was the entire court, watching, judging, waiting for my downfall. For the first time since arriving at the castle, I understood the true danger of my position. I wasn't just a stranger. I was a threat to the established order, to the balance carefully maintained for generations. That night, I couldn't sleep. The counsellor's words echoed in my mind, mixing with the diary's revelations and the king's confidences in the northern gardens. A web was forming around me, complex and dangerous, and I was at its centre without fully understanding why. Shortly before dawn, when I finally fell into a restless sleep, I dreamt of the forest, older and deeper than I had ever seen it. I dreamt of golden eyes watching me among the trees, of voices whispering my name, not the name by which I was known, but another, older, truer one. And I dreamt of blood, dripping from my hands, forming patterns on the forest floor. Designs that seemed to tell a story I could almost comprehend. I woke with a start, my heart beating violently against my ribs. The morning light streamed through the window cracks, but something was different. There was a scent in the air. Soft, metallic, familiar. Blood. I sat up in bed searching for the source of the odor. That's when I noticed. My hands were stained red, as if they had been dipped in scarlet ink, and beside me on the pillow was a small wooden figurine. A wolf carved with impressive perfection, its eyes two small amber stones. I looked around, stunned. The doors and windows were closed. No one could have entered during the night without me noticing, and yet there was proof that something had happened. Something I myself had done but couldn't remember. With trembling hands, I washed the blood in the basin of water. There were no cuts on my fingers, no visible wound that could explain that amount of blood. The only possible explanation was so absurd, so impossible that I barely dared to consciously formulate it. I had gone out during the night. I had done something my conscious mind didn't recall. The new moon ceremony would be held in the ancient temple, a circular stone structure erected in the heart of the forest. According to tradition, it was the exact spot where the first king had shed the blood of the sacred wolf, initiating the curse. Lena helped me dress for the occasion. The attire was simpler than I expected. A long white dress without adornments or jewels, just a dark red leather band tied at the waist. My hair was left loose, falling in waves over my shoulders. "You seem nervous," Lena commented as she braided small wild flowers into my hair. "Don't be afraid. The ritual is solemn, but not painful." I hesitated before asking, "Lena, have you ever heard of someone doing things in their sleep? Things they don't remember afterward?" Her fingers paused for a moment, then continued her work. "Among those marked by the ancient blood, that's not uncommon," she replied in a low voice. "Especially on special moons. It's as if a dormant part awakens when the conscious mind yields to sleep." "Those marked by the blood," I repeated, my throat suddenly dry. "You know what I am," she smiled sadly. "I suspected from the first day. There are signs for those who know how to observe. The way your gaze changes when you feel threatened. The way your body moves. More agile, more alert than normal. And your scent. It's subtle but different. Why didn't you say anything? It wasn't my place to reveal what you yourself didn't yet understand." Lena fastened the last flower and stepped back to admire the result. "Perfect. Like a bride of the ancient forest." The word bride made my stomach clench. I thought of the counselor's words about choosing a companion, and fear grew again. It wasn't the fact of being chosen by the king that terrified me. It was what it could mean. The weight such a choice would carry. The prophecy, the sacrifice mentioned in the diary. Everything seemed to point to a destiny I wasn't ready to accept. When we left the castle, the sun was already setting, painting the sky red and gold. A small procession had already formed. The council, some ladies of high lineage, including Virginia, dressed in dark blue, her expression grim, and the king's personal guard. There was no sign of him, and no one seemed willing to tell me when or how he would join us. The walk to the temple was silent, almost solemn. As we delved into the forest, the air grew denser, laden with scents of damp earth, moss, and something more. An ancient, primordial scent that awakened memories that weren't my own. The temple appeared among the trees like an apparition, a perfect circle of enormous stones, some still standing, others toppled by time. In the center, an altar of smooth stone, marked by deep grooves that I realized with a shiver had been made to channel blood. Councillor Arthur took his place before the altar, and the others positioned themselves in a circle. I noticed that I had been placed directly opposite the empty space that would presumably be occupied by the king. Virginia, beside me, kept her eyes fixed on the ground, her lips a thin, pale line. When the first gleam of stars became visible in the twilight sky, a sound filled the clearing, the same deep growl I had heard on the night I was saved. The wolves emerged from among the trees, eyes gleaming like lanterns in the gloom, and behind them, the king. But it wasn't the king as I knew him. He wore only dark leather pants, his bare chest marked by symbols painted in dark red. His hair, usually tied back, fell loose over his shoulders. And his eyes. His eyes had changed. His pupils dilated, reflected the torchlight like the eyes of a nocturnal animal. A collective gasp ran through the circle, and I realized I wasn't the only one to notice the transformation. The king was neither completely man nor completely wolf. He was on the threshold, at the exact point between the two worlds. He walked to the altar, moving with a predatory grace that reminded me of my dream. When he spoke, his voice was deeper, hoarser than normal. We are gathered on the moonless night, when the veil between worlds is thinnest, when past and future touch and paths are revealed. His eyes swept the circle, pausing on me for a longer moment. For 7 generations, we have borne the burden of divided blood. For 7 generations, we have ruled over 2 realms, that of men and that of shadows. Councillor Arthur stepped forward, offering the king a silver chalice. The cycle continues as it always has and always will. Blood calls blood. The king took the chalice and raised it to the sky. Tonight, as tradition dictates, I declare my intention. The council has heard my reasons and now witnesses my choice. My heart pounded, a frantic drum against my ribs. Beside me, Virginia straightened her posture, her face a mask of contained expectation. For generations, we have sought to strengthen our alliances through strategic unions, the king continued. Unions that brought political power, but no solution to our true problem, the curse we bear. Tonight, I choose a different path. A restless murmur ran through the circle. I saw Councillor Arthur's face harden, and Virginia's grow pale. The prophecy speaks of equal blood, the king said, his voice now closer to a growl. Of the encounter that can break the cycle. Therefore, my choice is not based on alliances or conveniences, but on the call of the ancient blood itself. He raised his hand, pointing in my direction. She, the Omega whom many judged unworthy, carries in her veins the same blood as mine. Not diluted by politics or generations of arranged marriages, but pure, strong, direct, from the original source. A stunned silence fell upon the clearing. All eyes turned to me, some in shock, others in disbelief, some in ill-disguised fury. Virginia seemed to have been struck by lightning, her body rigid, her eyes wide with disbelief. "This is absurd," the councillor finally exclaimed, breaking the silence. "An Omega from the settlement? Without lineage, without history. Your Majesty, you must reconsider. The council cannot approve." "The council has no power to approve or reject my choice," the king interrupted, his voice cutting like steel, "only to witness it. And as for her lineage," a dangerous smile curved his lips, "I suggest you examine more closely the birth records from 18 years ago, specifically the last child born from the Queen's womb, my mother." Another shock coursed through the assembly. Councillor Arthur grew pale as if he had seen a ghost. "The child died in childbirth. We all know that." "The child was declared dead," the king corrected, "by order of the council, which feared what the signs of her birth might mean. A girl born with the mark of the wolf, exactly as the prophecy foretold." The revelation fell upon me like an avalanche. The dizziness was so strong I swayed, and would have fallen if Virginia hadn't, ironically, held my arm in an involuntary reflex. "Are you saying—" I began, my voice almost inaudible. "I am saying, sister," the king replied, his voice now gentle, almost sad, "that blood called blood. That the wolf recognized what men tried to hide. That you were never an orphan, just lost, and now found." The world seemed to spin around me. Everything I believed about myself, the abandonment, the rejection, the loneliness, transformed into an elaborate lie. A conspiracy to keep me away, hidden, denied my true birth. "This is madness," Virginia said, recovering from the initial shock. "It can't be true. Where is the proof?" "The proof is in the blood," the king replied, descending from the altar and walking towards me. With each step he took, the wolves moved with him, like living shadows. In the call she hears even without understanding. In the dreams that haunt her. In the strength that grows within her, waiting to awaken. When he stood before me, he extended his hand, offering the chalice. "Drink, sister. Accept what has always been yours by right. Return to the lineage what was stolen from it." I looked at the chalice, mesmerized. The liquid within it wasn't wine, as I initially thought. It was blood, dark, thick, pulsing with a life of its own. What will happen if I drink? I asked, my voice trembling. What was dormant will awaken. What was fragmented will unite. And together with the power of the double blood, we can finally do what none of our ancestors could. Break the curse. Suddenly, I understood. The prophecy didn't speak of a couple, of a king and his companion. It spoke of siblings, the Alpha King and the lost daughter, reunited to undo what the first king had begun. What if I refuse? A shadow passed over his face. Then the cycle will continue. The curse will persist for another generation, and another, and another. And you will remain divided, incomplete, hearing calls you don't understand, feeling hungers you cannot satisfy. Virginia stepped forward, her eyes sparking with fury. This is a farce. She can't be your sister. She can't be of royal lineage. Look at her, an omega, a nobody. The king didn't even look at her. His eyes remained fixed on mine, intense, pleading. The choice is yours, sister. It always has been. I looked at the chalice, at the blood that pulsed as if alive. I thought of my entire life, the loneliness, the pain of being rejected, the emptiness I always felt in my chest, as if a crucial part of me had been torn away. I thought of the dreams, the calls of the forest, the strange abilities I always tried to hide. And I thought of the king, my brother, divided between two worlds, bearing alone the weight of a curse he never asked for. With hands that no longer trembled, I took the chalice. To the end of the curse, I said, my voice firm, to the beginning of truth. And I drank. At first, nothing happened. Then, like a rising wave, the sensation began. A heat that spread from my stomach to every inch of my body, as if my veins carried liquid fire instead of blood. The pain came next, sharp and piercing, making me double over with a cry I couldn't suppress. I fell to my knees, my hands grasping the earth, my fingers sinking into the soil as if seeking an anchor. The world around me dissolved into distorted colors and sounds. I heard screams, some of alarm, others of fear. I heard Councillor Arthur order them to hold me, and Virginia screaming that I should be executed for treason. And I heard something else, a low, constant growl, which I realized with a shock came from my own throat. I lifted my face and saw the king, my brother, kneeling before me, holding my shoulders. His eyes, now completely transformed, golden like amber, fixed on mine with a mix of concern and triumph. "It's beginning," he said, his voice distant as if coming through water. "Don't fight it. Accept it. Let the blood do what needs to be done." I tried to answer, but my voice no longer formed human words. A new spasm of pain coursed through me, and I felt my bones move under my skin, reconfiguring themselves. My senses suddenly sharpened. The smell of the earth, the forest, the humans around, all intensified 1,000-fold. My vision changed, colors disappearing, replaced by a terrifying sharpness even in the growing darkness. And then, finally came the understanding. Not in words or thoughts, but in images, sensations, ancestral memories that flowed directly into my consciousness. I saw the first king. I saw the sacred wolf. I saw the bloodshed and the curse being born. I saw generations of my lineage fighting against the division, trying to govern two worlds without completely belonging to either. And I saw the solution. Always present. Always waiting for the right moment, for the encounter predicted centuries ago. When the transformation completed, I rose on 4 paws, my body covered in silver-white fur that gleamed under the stars. Before me, my brother had also completed his change. An enormous wolf, black as night, the same golden eyes that I now knew were also mine. The assembly recoiled in panic, some fleeing into the forest, others paralyzed by shock. Only the wolves remained calm, forming a protective circle around us, accepting us as their leaders by right of blood. "Do you understand now?" My brother's voice sounded in my mind, clear as if spoken aloud. Together we are the balance. You, born to be the bridge between worlds. I, born to govern them. The divided blood, finally reunited. What happens now? I asked, amazed by the ease of communication, as if we had always spoken like this. Now we complete the ritual. Now we break the curse, not by denying our dual nature, but by fully embracing it, following the path the prophecy always indicated. Together we walk to the stone altar. The remaining counsellors, including Arthur, recoiled further, terror evident on their faces. Only Virginia remained, paralysed, her eyes fixed on us as if contemplating a nightmare. She conspired with her father, my brother explained. It was she who convinced the council to declare you dead at birth, who convinced them to deliver you to the settlement so you would grow up without knowing who you truly were. Why? Fear. The council always feared the prophecy, feared what it would mean for their power, and she personally feared losing what she believed was hers by right, the throne beside me. I looked at Virginia, not with hatred, but with a new understanding. I saw in her now what I couldn't see before. The fear beneath the arrogance, the insecurity beneath the contempt. A woman who had spent her entire life being shaped for a single purpose, only to see everything crumble at the decisive moment. On the altar, my brother placed a paw, opening a cut in the pad. The blood flowed, filling the ancient grooves. I followed his example, allowing my own blood to mix with his, completing the circle that had been broken 7 generations ago. With this blood voluntarily offered, his voice echoed in my mind, resonating also in the minds of all present, humans and wolves. We break the cycle of the curse. We do not reject the gift of the wolf, but accept it as part of who we are, no longer divided between two worlds, but unified, whole, at peace with both natures. The blood in the grooves began to glow, first faintly, then with increasing intensity, until the entire clearing was bathed in scarlet light. I felt a change within me, not a separation, not a struggle between two natures, but an integration, a harmony I had never experienced before. When the light dissipated, we were still wolves, but something had changed. The feeling of fragmentation, of incompleteness that had always accompanied me, had disappeared. In its place, a certainty, a belonging that transcended physical forms or limited definitions. "It is done," my brother declared, satisfaction evident in his mental voice. The curse has transformed into a gift. What divided us now completes us. Together we raised our heads and howled at the starry sky, not a lament, but a song of liberation, of celebration, of rebirth. The wolves around us joined the chorus, and the sound echoed through the ancient forest, carrying the message to all corners of the kingdom. The divided children were finally whole. Later, when we returned to the castle, again in human form, but forever transformed in our essence, I found Lena waiting in my chambers. Her eyes gleamed with suppressed tears, and in her hands she held something that made my heart stop, a small silver locket with the symbol of the royal lineage. "It always belonged to you," she said, placing it in my hands. "Your mother, the Queen, placed it around your neck the moment you were born, before they took you. I managed to save it and kept it all these years, waiting for the day it would return to its rightful hands." I opened the locket, and inside was a tiny portrait of a woman with kind eyes and a small lock of hair. Not mine, I realized, but hers, a fragment of the mother I never knew, preserved like a treasure through the years of separation. "You knew," I whispered. "From the beginning." Lena nodded. "I was your wet nurse in the few days we had you in the castle. Then, when the council ordered your removal, I asked to be sent along. but I was denied. I had to watch from afar, powerless, as they delivered you to the old healer. Why didn't you tell me? Why didn't you bring me back? The council was too powerful, and there was the prophecy. It needed to happen at the right time, in the right way. Your brother and I knew that one day blood would call blood. We just didn't know when. I hugged her then, letting the tears finally come. Not of sadness, not of anger for what I had lost, but of gratitude for what I had found. An identity, a purpose, a true home. The next morning, a new era began for the kingdom. The king and my brother officially presented me to the court as the lost princess, the queen's legitimate daughter, heiress by right of blood. Counselor, Arthur was removed from his position, though by royal mercy he was not punished beyond that. Virginia disappeared on the night of the ritual, and rumours said she had left for the southern lands, vowing never to return. As for me, I took my place as chief counselor, the voice that united the two worlds our kingdom had always encompassed. No longer Omega, no longer rejected, but recognized, respected, complete in my dual nature. On full moon nights, my brother and I still transform, no longer by curse, but by choice. We run through the ancient forest with our pack, free, whole, in harmony with the blood that runs in our veins. And when we howl at the starry sky, it is not a lament for the division, but a celebration of the unity found. Because this is the true lesson I learned on my journey. Sometimes, what seems like a curse is merely a misunderstood gift. And what makes us different is not our weakness, but our greatest strength.